To the half hour huddle where we spend 20 to 30 minutes with former players. Today we have former Iowa quarterback Ricky Stanzi, who, as according to Iowa fan base, is the GOAT. Uh, you were honorable mention All American, 26-9 as a starter, fourth in Iowa history in passing yards and touchdowns. And I thought this stat was kind of cool. You're the only quarterback to start 3 games against Penn State's coach Joe Paterno and win all 3.
Yes, that is a crazy stat that was kind of brought to my attention a while back. That's an interesting stat. I mean, the man's history goes, obviously his record, goes without saying. So to have that I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah, when I was kind of doing a little research, I saw that and I thought it was ironic that only one player had ever done it, and you're the one that's done it. Like,
Right.
I think it's a pretty incredible stat. I mean, especially considering that Penn State over their history has been a pretty solid program, and you beat them 3 times in a row.
Well, defense and run game too.
Yeah.
My name
Yeah.
gets thrown in there, but you go watch those games. There were really good battles. A lot of fun to play in those games. We had a nice rivalry with them when I was there.
Yeah, it feels like that's kind of like not an official rivalry, but when Penn State and Iowa are going up, it's probably going to be a good game.
Yeah. And we knew that too, just from the history when Kirk was there, they had close games with Penn State all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And so both of those teams, there's a ton of rivalries inside the Big Ten, but like you said, there's still those rivalries that don't have a trophy game to them, but it's always a big matchup when it's on the calendar.
Yeah. So what's post-football life been for you?
It's been great, man. Like I'm finally settled back home in Ohio. My wife and I both grew up here, so we're around grandparents. We've got 3 kids. I have a 5-year-old, a 3-year-old, and a 1-year-old. I'm a movement coach, so I'm working with the Go to Movement system. I'm a coach and a professor in the system, so I help train the new coaches coming in, and then I also have my own athletes that I'm training, and I kind of have a little QB thing that I do too. So I'm staying really busy. I'm enjoying life, and it's really been a blast.
Awesome. You're staying busy during quarantine as well.
Oh yeah, I mean, probably more busy now than usual because the kids are always in the house. Luckily for us, we live on a street with a ton of kids, so they're out and about, running around, having fun. They don't think twice about nothing. So it's still been fun for us to kind of hang out on the street and be around our neighbors. And, it's been a weird couple months, but everybody's doing what they can to kind of stay sane.
So you mentioned, you're from Ohio. What made you choose going to Iowa out of high school?
I had a lot of the MAC offers from local. There's a lot of MAC schools in Ohio.
Yeah.
So I had a lot of attention there. I really liked Miami of Ohio. Big Ben had just came out of there. Shane Montgomery was the coach. I really liked him. Me and him got along well. I loved the campus. I loved the team. But then I got an offer from Iowa, and I really loved Big Ten. Like you said, I mean, I grew up in Ohio, obviously. So I was an Ohio State fan. I was you could say a Big Ten fan. I was just always watching Big Ten ball. So to go down to Iowa and to get to see the campus, and I didn't even go there for a game. I just kind of went during basketball season and got to see everybody. And, being with Coach O'Keefe and then meeting Coach Ferentz and Coach Doyle and being around that atmosphere, I knew that's where I wanted to go. And so after seeing that place and being around that staff, it was really an easy decision for me.
Yeah, I mean, I know I've been there for a game, and that atmosphere is insane. So I can only imagine if you were visiting for a game, it would have been even more attention to that to Iowa.
Yeah, I think a lot of people don't realize what Iowa has. They don't know much about the state, or they don't know much about the football program or the rich history there. And then especially they haven't been to a game in Kinnick. If you go to a game in Kinnick, you're like, oh, okay, this place is for real. These fans they're right on top of you. It's got such a rich history there that for me, I didn't even need to see the game, and I knew I was totally sold on the atmosphere and the people surrounding that university.
So what makes Coach Ferentz such a great coach? He's been there like 20 years or so. Every couple of years, he puts together a really solid year. They win 10, 11 games, and not necessarily surprise people, but they kind of do, mainly because Iowa isn't really on people's radars a lot. But he does this consistently.
That's the word, consistency, man. From like day one, the message is very clear. I mean, I remember, you're at this beautiful campus and you got all these great teachers around and everybody's in a learning atmosphere. I learned the most on those Monday and Tuesdays when we would sit in there for team meetings and Coach Ferentz would just talk to us. He would just talk and he would kind of segue and go different places. And it was always related back to football. But the way that man kind of set everything up and everybody knew what their job was. You knew what you were supposed to do. You knew what the Iowa way was. And when we all buy in together on something and we do it as a team, that's when we get tremendous results. And so that was always preached from the second I walked through the door till the last, game I played when we all left. So the consistency is always there, and you learn as you go through the system, and everybody builds, everybody gets better. Coach Ferentz and his staff has a knack for taking athletes that are different positions or maybe not as heralded in high school, maybe 2-3 star, and then making them into all Americans and all pros. You look at Bob Sanders and Dallas Clark and Robert Gallery and all the names, they keep coming up. It just speaks to the type of man that he is and the staff that he put together and the message that he portrays to the players and how consistent he is with that throughout his whole career.
Yeah, development's been huge for you guys. I know there's kind of a running joke on the internet that if Iowa offers a tight end out of high school, like they're going to go in the first round.
Right. Like you start to get these reputations, you see the old linemen, you see the tight ends, you see it kind of build its own rep like tight end U. And it's true. I mean, you can't argue it. You see the talent that comes out of there. A lot of guys in the league will often say that they feel like they're ready mentally for the NFL. They're ready for that sort of business approach of do your job, don't complain, and we're going to win some games if we do that, right? And everybody is responsible for themselves. And so you feel very NFL ready from a mental standpoint when you leave Iowa.
Do you think that might have to do with Ferentz's? Obviously, there's been rumors in the past about him going to the NFL. So do you think he has the understanding of what it takes for these kids to play in the NFL? Because if people think that he could be an NFL coach, he obviously would know how to handle an NFL locker room.
Absolutely. And he has ties to the NFL. He has ties to Belichick. He has ties to Cleveland. He's been on a different roster. So he knows that level. It's funny because when I was coming out of high school, everybody was like, don't go to Iowa. Coach Ferentz is the next head coach in the NFL. Like it's a lock. And what actually happened was he obviously stayed with the staff. Nothing changed when I was there. And all the other schools that I looked at all had staff changes. So Coach Ferentz was very clear with all of us when we were coming. He's like, I want to be here. This is where I want to be. So he had that knowledge from the NFL, but he applied it to sort of that college atmosphere for us. And I think that's part of what allows him to build a strong program is he knows how to kind of see in the future 2 to 3 years and how to move the pieces into place so that you can go on those runs and you can have those teams that put a great season together.
So speaking of a great season, 2008, your first year starting, you had a pretty good year. 2009, you guys come out, and that, in the end, it was a phenomenal year. You guys finished like 10-2 or something, I think.
Yeah, something like that.
The start of the year, the one thing that always interests me is like schools like Northern Iowa seem to trip up Iowa and Iowa State.
For sure.
You don't know, you usually win, but it usually ends up being a lot closer than what people think. What do you think is the reason behind that?
Dude, UNI is tough, man. I mean, you can say what you want about Northern. That is a tough program. They're well coached. When they came to play us, they did not care that they were in Kinnick. They were not worried about the atmosphere or anything. They came to play. We had to block 2 kicks at the end, back to back, to win that game. And I remember walking off the field and I'm like, oh my gosh, what's going to happen this year? Like, you kind of have that moment, like you won the game, but it didn't feel like a win, but it was hats off to Northern Iowa. They always play well. It's a tough program. Some of those early games you could call them trap games in a sense because you're thinking they're tune-ups, but it was definitely not a tune-up with UNI. And it kind of was funny because we went on that year and had a bunch of games like that were just like nail biters down to the last second, crazy finishes. And it kind of just was almost the theme of that whole season.
So I mentioned you before we started, 2009, you guys playing, and then you go to State College, number 5 Penn State, on the road, night game, whiteout. Everything is in Penn State's favor. I'm there. I'm going to say I was the good luck charm because I've been to Penn State's whiteout 5 times. I'm 4-1 in the whiteout. So I'm going to say that I'm the good luck charm there. Right. But you guys knock off number 5 Iowa or number 5 Penn State in the country. Like, what was that like? That definitely had to like change the momentum of the season for sure.
Yeah, I mean, that game and that storyline leading up to that game really dates back a year to when we beat them at our place. And they were, I think, third in the country at the
Mhm.
time. And we weren't really who we were at that point in 2009. We were kind of, I would say that Penn State game in 08 started to build that team that you saw in 09. Like, we were like, dude, we could win games. Like, we could play with all these guys. So once the 2000, the next year showed up, 2009, and we were playing them at their place, they were fired up. They were ready to get back at us. They hit like a 60-yard post to start the game. In that place, if you remember, that place was rocking because the stadium just kind of goes up and in on you. So the amount of volume coming onto the field is outrageous. I mean, I completely lost my voice. My tight ends and tackles said they couldn't hear me. I'm like, guys, I'm screaming. The atmosphere was nuts. It was a defensive battle. Adrian Claiborne blocks the punt and has the play of almost the year, you could argue, and really seals that victory for us. Strong, those were strong defense, great run game. We were able to run out the clock, play the 4-minute offense, and that game kind of played into our hands. But yeah, between the rain, the night game, and the whiteout, and just that atmosphere, and then what happened the year before, it really made that game a huge moment on the national scale. But then once again, another confirmation to us, like, hey, we can play with the best teams in the country. We can do this.
So, two of our Iowa fans, Austin and Hayden, wanted me to ask about this because unfortunately you end up getting injured later that year.
Right.
You don't want to play the what if game, but obviously you lose to Northwestern, you lose to Ohio State, and then you win your last 2 games of the year.
Yeah.
Is there ever a sense where it's like, if only, I didn't get injured, things could have been different. Obviously, you're going to play at Ohio State, and that one's going to be a tough game no matter what. But you got to feel like there's a chance that you beat Northwestern.
Yeah, I mean, I've honestly had that question posed a couple times, and me personally, I'm never the what if guy.
Mm-hmm.
I'm always like, I don't believe in coincidences. Things happen for a reason, yada yada. So I've never really sat and been like, darn, like I wonder. That's kind of more like the fans will theorize about that, and I understand why. But for us, to me, the season was perfect. It is what it is. It kind of fell into place the way that it did. It's easy to play the what if game, but like you said, I mean, Ohio State's a tough opponent, and playing those games are never easy. We took every week that season 1 week at a time. And I know it's cliche and everybody talks about it like that, but the reality was, as we look back on it as teammates and we talk about it to this day, it's like we only remember the next game. And even like the next play. We were down many times in that season. We were behind many times in that season, but it never really felt like that. We never felt like we had a losing mentality. So even when I did go down, there wasn't this like, oh, the season's over. We're like, we'll figure it out. I don't know how we're going to figure it out, but we'll figure it out.
So 2010, obviously you guys don't finish with the record you did, but it felt like based off on looking at the games, everything was like within a touchdown where it kind of the reverse of the year before where one or two different things go away. Maybe you're not 8-5, maybe you're 10-3 or 11-2, that you're losing games by 3-4 points where, was it maybe, turnover, didn't like a turnover on the roster that maybe you didn't have the right guys or a couple of guys missed different plays. Like, talk about 2010 a little bit.
That's that's the thing is like for 2009 we were the underdog, right? And then 2010 goes up and it's like, oh, you're expected to win. So I think I hate saying that played a role, but I know that subconsciously those things out there play a role. And then for us, it was a really a moment for us as a crew to be like, wow, first off, like you're saying, we were in every game. Every game's always been tight in the Big Ten. It's not unusual to have them come down to the last possession. So we knew that games could swing from a play or two, and it was always that close. So we never felt like we were ever out of it, but there was definitely that vibe in that season, 2010, where especially the last 4 games, man, we just couldn't get it going. We struggled. I know I personally struggled at the end, and that's what bothered me because I know that I didn't play as efficiently as I did in the first half, and I made some errors, especially in the Minnesota game, especially at Northwestern, where I was like, wish I would have had that back. So I know that my play got sloppy at the end, especially the last quarter of the season, but we kind of, circled the wagons. Everybody got back on board, and we were able to go up and play a really good Missouri team led by Blaine Gabbard, who I ended up playing with in Jacksonville. We became good buddies. And we were able to finish the season on a win. So finishing the season on a win was nice because of that skid we had at the end. But you look back and you really do appreciate that the game of football, although it's played over 4 quarters, sometimes it does just come down to 1, 2, or maybe 3 plays that really can make the difference.
Yeah, no, like you said, that finishing top 10 the year before, you're going to come into the season with a little more of a target on your back because
For sure.
people are going to realize that, there's your obvious ones on a consistent year and year out basis that are going to be good. But this year it's like, all right, well, they finished top 10 in the nation last year. Like, they're going to be a little bit more aware of you guys.
Right. You gotta handle those pressures. And I think we did a decent job working through the season. And we, like the game at Arizona got away from us. Wisconsin got away from us late. And those were 2 that I was like, man, we had them, 1 or 2 plays, better decision here, looking back at the film. And so those are those moments. But like I said before, even tying back to the Northwestern injury, it's just, you move on, you learn from it, and you let it teach you a lesson for something else in life, and just use it like that. And that way you're always progressing and you're building. And then you talk about it here, you talk about it to a younger athlete, and then they can learn from your mistakes, and then they can hopefully not repeat them.
Yep, absolutely. So I want to fast forward to Iowa football today. What is your thoughts on the current state of the program? It feels like that they're, like you said in the beginning, very consistent. What do you think that they need to do overall to continue to be on an uphill trajectory?
Yeah, I mean, it's the same way. It's the Iowa way, that it's not going to change. The way that Coach Ferentz, Coach Doyle put the program together, everybody's going to be in this together. They're going to be in it together to put together the best team and the best season that they can. It's a case of chop wood, carry water. Cheat, and when you're going to start, catching that momentum, and it's important for a team to kind of learn how to win. And you got to learn how to win those games that are kind of ugly. The Penn State games, the Michigan State game that we had in 2009. Like, there's some of those games where it gets gritty and it's not always pretty, but you find a way to win. That kind of stuff, that's part of that off-season mentality of, all the work that you put in during the off-season is going to pay off, when you come time to play in these big matchups. You kind of see that at Iowa, where there's a program where the young kids come in, they're maybe not ready to make as big of an impact. And I couldn't see the field with a telescope when I was a freshman. So the fact that I got to start for 3 years, it shows you that they are going to build that group. So you'll see it come again. You'll see another wave of great athletes show up in a great group that sort of binds together and really, puts their head down and mulls forward and puts together another one of those great seasons. And Coach Ferentz does it all the time.
So as a quarterback, I want to ask you this question because Iowa's going to replace, one of the all-time leading passers at Iowa, Nate Stanley. It felt like he was there for a decade or so, but he's moved on. What is it like to transition to a new quarterback, under Iowa regimen or even in college football in general, to bring a new quarterback in over a guy who's been starting for a couple of years?
Yeah, it's definitely a change of guard. And I think that whoever that new quarterback is, they've got to sort of find their footing, find their voice, maybe early on. I know for me, it was more of, I got to lead with action. I don't really have a voice right now. I'm not, the guy that they've seen in the huddle, like you're saying, for 2-3 years where it's understood. So you got to kind of go out early and make plays, be a leader, and be the guy that they're going to look to in the fourth quarter when things are tight and they don't want to see any panic. They want to see a calm, collected man standing in front of them and says, we're going to go win this game, And so whoever steps in, they're going to have their own little way of doing it. And it's going to be their way. And I know that Coach O'Keefe will have whoever is going to be the next quarterback ready to go. And Coach Ferentz have them ready to go. It's a game of plug in. And the great thing about having a Nate in front of you is, who is ever sitting behind him, Spence, they're going to get to watch, and they got to see what Nate did, and they got to learn from how he handled situations. So that helps the next guy behind to have somebody who's actually really stable and has been there, because then you get to see what it's like to lead a program for numerous years. And they have a really good sort of barometer on how to do that. You see that in the NFL at times, like an Aaron Rodgers, Brett Favre in a sense, where you get to sit and you get to learn. And then when it's your turn, you get to take those lessons from that guy before you and kind of apply them to your own sort of playing days.
So what do you think it would take for Iowa to win the Big Ten? They had that magical season a couple years ago when they went 12-0 in the regular season. Obviously sputtered against Michigan State, nearly won the Big Ten.
Yeah.
Would have been put them in the playoff, honestly.
Right.
So do you think there's anything that they could do different to potentially get back there? Or do you think it's more of just keep pushing, keep following everything that Coach Ferentz is saying, maybe getting a little lucky with a couple games here or there?
Yeah, I mean, we've always kind of been big on you got to have all three phases clicking at once. That's part of the consistency, but playing complementary football is another way that people will phrase that. Having the offense complement the defense and the special teams complements everybody. In 2009, when we were really clicking, we had that. Like when we were down as an offense, the defense picked us up. When the defense had given something up, when we needed to score, we did that. So the timing of the game plays to your favor as a team because everybody's in it together. So getting everybody consistent, having three phases that have enough players littered across the roster that can make impact on defense, on offense, on the special teams. I think that's huge in the Big Ten specifically because, like we've been saying, all the games are so close, so it's coming down to a play. What phase is going to be the one that steps up and who's going to make the play? So by playing consistent complementary football, that's how a school like Iowa puts together a really good season.
And I think in the Big Ten West, you see a lot of, I guess you could say, similar strategies or methodologies because Wisconsin, Minnesota, Iowa, they all kind of feed off of similar players. They don't go out, they're not getting the, 5-star players. They're developing their guys and making them into great players. You look at Minnesota. Minnesota had a really good year this past year, and none of them were super high profile players. And I feel like Iowa does the same thing. And, they develop and then they go on to have pretty good NFL careers as well.
Yeah, that's a case of feeding off the culture. Like a young kid who doesn't quite know what they're doing yet, but they want to be a part of that. They want to be a part of that culture. I know that was the case for me and my buddies. Like we wanted to win. Like we wanted to show the guys ahead of us that we could hang, that we were cool, that we were like, yeah, we can play with you guys. We're tough too. And then you want to show the guys behind you the path, right? The way to go and win games. So when you have pride in the culture and you understand what the singular goal is, it's easy to get the buy-in. And when you have that, when you have the young kids buying in, it's not so much a case of talent as it is a case of getting as much of their talent out of them, right? Getting that talent out of them and developing them, which we talked about. Coach Ferentz and Coach Doyle are tremendous at. When you develop guys, you get the most out of them, and then you see that product show up on the field.
So I got a couple last questions here, and then I'll get you out of here. These are a little bit simpler questions. What was your favorite game you ever played in your career?
I got to go with the 2008 Penn State because kind of like I said before, we were kind of trying to figure out who we were earlier in the season. We were a decent team, and then we had them in our place, the number 3 team in the country, to win that game at night with the last kick. And then that game to me kind of built the momentum that led to 2009, which was an amazing season. So the 2008 Penn State game has always been a memory for me.
How about the best player you ever played with?
Best player I ever played with? Man, it's probably got to be Adrian Claiborne.
Okay.
Yeah,
that's fair.
Like Adrian, they would have to take Adrian out of practice because he would just like wreck the drill. It was like he would just get to the ball, he'd get to the quarterback. So coach would be, hey, Adrian, you're good. Like go sit off the side. Him and Ballard, they put them off to the side so we could run a play. So like Claiborne was very dominant, and obviously his career. I mean, you can just go see what he's done, and he's still doing. He's over in Cleveland. He's in Cleveland now, so I'm fired up to have him on the Browns.
So what about the best player you ever played against?
The best player I ever played against, I got to play against J.J. Watt, kind of before J.J. Watt was the big name that he is. And I remember him, he actually got me on the sack at the end. It was in 2010. He tripped me up. And I just remember him, making an impact the year before when we won it at Randall, and then he had an impact when we lost at our own place. But he was somebody looking back, and I was like, man, who is this? Like, who is this cat? Like, he's dominant. He's huge. He plays big. He plays strong. He's got a motor. And he was very impressive to play against. And he was somebody you had to know. Navarro Bowman for Penn State.
It's another good one.
Yeah, I mean, when he was somebody where I was like, where is he? Where is he? Is he on the line? Which side of the line is he on? So those two guys stand out as somebody that you kind of had to really pay attention to what they were doing on the field.
Now, the last one I got here, you kind of touched on this already about where you were looking before you went to Iowa. But if you weren't going to go to Iowa, where do you think you would have went?
If I wasn't going to Iowa, I was going to go to Miami of Ohio. The MAC had just kind of had that like sort of resurgence of success, and there was a bunch of QBs that were coming out of the MAC, and they were having success in the NFL. So I was kind of going into college right at that moment. So when all these MAC schools were showing up, I was like, oh, this is great. Like, they get to throw it around in Miami. You see what Big Ben did at Miami. He just hung out there in the shotgun and let it rip 5 wide. And that was sort of the offense I played in high school. So for me, it was going to be Miami of Ohio until Iowa showed up.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate you joining us today. I appreciate you taking the time to do this.
Yeah, that was a blast, man. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Well, I hope you stay safe and enjoy the rest of quarantine.
I will. You too, brother.
Thanks.
All right. Peace.